This is the Listening Books podcast for every kind of reader, but especially for fans of audiobooks. I'm Jessica Stone, and today I'm joined by Annie Aldington. Annie is the voice behind some of the most popular titles in the Listening Books collection, including novels by Dilly Court, Martina Cole, Katie Price, Aoife Walsh, and Kitty Neale. Annie, thanks so much for joining me today. You have a lot of audiobook credits to your name. I wonder, Have you kept count of how many you've narrated at this point?
I've got no idea, to be honest.
Really?
It must
that
be,
many?
I don't know. Because I've been doing it for quite a long time. I've been doing it for quite a few years. It must be over 500, 600, something like that. I mean, when it was the cassette days as well. They're not all up on Audible, but when I first started, it was cassettes.
Yeah.
And then it went to CDs, and now it's MP3s and download and all that sort of stuff. So, when I first started, it was cassettes. And some of those, I don't know if they've been done again. I mean, I have done some again. I've just recently done Mary Jane Staples. I don't know if you know that author, really prolific author, wrote loads and loads of books, actually a man writing as a woman.
Oh.
And he wrote a series about the Addams family. I've just 2 years ago recorded all 30 books in the series that I'd done on cassette 30 years ago. And it's a really popular series, and they're very dated in a way, set around Woolworths in South London. Old-fashioned family, starts in 1916, goes up to 1969, and it follows this family all the way through. But people seem to really love that sort of nostalgic, and lockdown produced a lot of back catalogues.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point, actually. And you know what? I'm impressed as well that wanting to record them, that they wanted you to voice them again, because I suppose they could have cast someone new if they were going to record all over again. But the fact that they were obviously really happy with the way that it was done the first time round.
Yeah, well, I shared them. There was me and a brilliant reader called Terry Whale, who's recently just passed. But we shared them because one of the central characters was a guy called Boots. And the other central character was his mother, called Chinese Lady, because she worked in a Chinese laundry.
Oh, I see.
And so we sort of shared them. But when the series came up again, they decided to have one voice do them all.
Right.
So yes, they went for me, and I was thrilled. I mean, it was a great series to do.
What a wonderful compliment, though, on your talent and on your work. You mentioned you've been in this industry for a long time, like since the days of that we were recording on tape. And I wonder if you could maybe just tell us what your path looked like into audiobook narration. How did you get into it?
Yeah, well, I went to drama school and left drama school, and then I moved to Newcastle, believe it or not. Yeah. And I was trying to get work as an actor up there, and I did a few things, a few stage shows and things like that up there, and a bit of touring. And then a friend of a friend was working in an audiobook company in Whitley Bay, can you believe? And he was in the cassette reproducing department, and he said to me, "But I work in this audiobook company, they just record talking books. Why don't you have a go, send them a demo?" So I literally walked down there, recorded this demo of extracts from books and put it through the door. And then I got a phone call about a week later, and the guy that ran it said, "Can you come and do a test read? Because we've got a reader," because all the readers went up from London. They used to travel up from London to do it, to this place in Whitley Bay. And he said, "Can you come and do a test read? Because one of our actors has got another job and they can't get here." So I'll never forget, it was a book by D. Williams called Polly of Penn's Place. And nobody told me what to do. So I just picked up the manuscript and thought, well, I know I've got to read it and I've got to do some characters. So I've got to look at it before I start. So I did that and did some characters, went in, did a test read. And I think he was just grateful that I was up the road and I could step in at the last minute. So he said, "Oh, I'm going to take a chance on you. I'll give you the job." And that was it. So he gave me another one and another one and another one and another one. And while I lived up there, that's how I started. And then, of course, the industry got bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I started to work for other companies. So I just sort of slipped into it, really. Wouldn't happen now. They wouldn't take that chance.
I'm just thinking like to imagine that sort of success that quickly. That's incredible.
Well, back in the day as well, it wasn't like it is now where you have to audition now, you're cast to type, an author can request you, a publisher can request you. In those days, a lot of actors used to poo-poo it and say, talking books, And now they all want to do it, of course, because it's such big business and all the big names do it now. You've got Stephen Fry and Judi Dench and all of those people doing it now. Whereas then, they really were grateful for somebody going in and doing it.
Yeah.
So that's how I started. It would not happen now. They would never give me that chance now, because now with young actors who want to do it, you have to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
You have to know what you're doing now. You have to walk into that studio and know what you're doing.
Yeah. Because you were trained as an actor and then went straight into audiobook narration. And then it sounds like you were kind of right off the bat, never out of work within audiobook narration after that. Did you ever think, well, I should take some classes specifically in this, or was there anything that you felt like you needed to learn after that, or was it a sort of learn as you go kind of a thing?
For me, it was a learn as you go. And I bought the Cicely Berry book on voice acting and all of that sort of stuff. But basically, I did learn on the job. And I'm still learning now. I still get sometimes a moment in studio where I'll go, oh, right. That's how that's done, or that's what makes that easier. So you're learning all the time, but I definitely learn on the job and asked lots of questions.
Do you have an example of that, actually? That sounded like a real epiphany, like, oh, that makes that easier.
Things like if you're doing a particular, like with male voices, there's might have been a moment where my jaw suddenly really dropped and I got about 4 notes lower than I would normally and thought, oh yeah, of course, and just sort of, or with an accent, because I use something called the Accent Kit, which is an app.
Oh, okay.
And it's really useful for doing accents, and it does the same exercises and it gets people from the area to do the exercises, and it's always consonants, vowels, a bit of free speech and a bit of text that it's called Arthur the Rat, this bit of text, and it's got every sound in it that accent would make. So, and it tells you where to place it in the mouth, which is the most important thing for me. And when that happens and all of a sudden the accent falls into that place in your mouth, you suddenly go, oh, and the accent just comes out. And that is a real wow moment, especially if it's an accent you can't do. Like Northern Irish I had in a book quite recently, could never do it, could never ever do it. And I kept practicing, and all of a sudden it's what we call 4.5 in the mouth. And it shows you the diagram of the mouth so you know where to place that accent. And when it hit that 4.5 for the first time, it suddenly just started to come out.
Wow.
So
I'm writing that down, by the way. I know some people who would find that very helpful.
Yeah, it is. And like RP is 1.5, so that's right at the front. And then something like Liverpool is 5.5. So it's right at the back of the, it's right there. And you can sort of, once you start placing it, it sort of just comes. You need to practice a bit, but it comes.
Wow. And that's the Accent Kit. Is that what it's called?
The Accent Kit. So it's free download. It hasn't got all of the accents in the world, but it's got most of the British accents and most of the American accents as well, with, a bit from around the world. So, and you have to buy the accent. It's £3.49, but then it's yours to keep forever in your library. It's a really good app. I would recommend it to anybody.
Fantastic. You were saying to me just before we began how your recording changed for you during the pandemic. Could you say a little bit about that and what happened during lockdown? How did things change?
Well, I had to set up from home very, very quickly because I had a book that I was due to start. So I had nothing. had a crappy old laptop, and that was about it. So I had to go down the Apple Mac, the mic, everything, set it up, wait for that to be delivered because everyone was ordering Apple Macs and mics.
Right.
And then literally built a tent because I live in a flat. I bought a shower tent. You can get those shower tents that are about 20 quid. I bought one. I think I should go on Blue Peter because I was really proud. I kept taking photos of it and sending it off to people, going, "Look at this! Look what I've done." So I took the sort of the material off and used the frame and pinned duvets around the frame, and then put a table and chairs in there and put every cushion that I had in the house, from all the sofas, the beds, everything, all up the side and all around me. Used clothes pegs and pegged myself in, and then sort of started. But because I live in a block of flats and everyone was at home doing DIY, I was recording myself because down the line was impossible unless the producer wanted to do it overnight. So they trusted me to do it myself and just use a dog clip, a dog,
one clicker,
of those clicker things. And recording files. So I used to start at 3 a.m.
And so just to explain to people who are listening, the clicker would be used for whenever you need to do a retake.
That's right.
And that click makes a particular spike in the waveform so that a producer then who's doing the editing, they can see at a glance where they are going to be taking something out. And it makes the process a whole lot quicker so they don't have to listen to a very long bit sometimes, and maybe they're actually trying to fix something only to realize that then you do a retake of it anyway and waste that time. So that helps them see at a glance where those mistakes and retakes are. Carry on.
That's right. Yeah. So that's what I did for about, I suppose, 6 or 7 books. And it was that really hot summer of the first lockdown as well. So sitting under all these thousands of duvets, in my knickers and vest, because it was about 37 degrees, and thinking, God, I'm so glad nobody can hear me. But then worrying that I'll be waking people up, because a lot of my books, I do a lot of crime, like Martina Cole, Kerry Barnes, and, Kimberly Chambers, where there's loads and loads of shouting in it. And I used to be thinking at 4 a.m, oh, God, say the woman upstairs thinks I'm being attacked or something. And I did ask her, I said, can you hear me? She said, no, but I suppose the duvets must have deadened it a bit. But I didn't like it. I didn't like being producer, editor, proofer. I didn't like all of that. I just preferred to sit there and have somebody say, oh, can we try it that way? Or, bring me in and all that sort of stuff. So as soon as the studios opened, I went back in.
Yeah. Did you find that it was affecting your ability or the ease of concentrating on the read when you were also having to play sound engineer?
Yes.
At the same time?
Definitely. I felt sort of stilted. I didn't feel as if I could let myself go, partly because I couldn't move in this cocoon that I'd made for myself. So, I was very, very conscious. I kept listening to myself and then doubting myself and thinking, did I say that wrongly? Oh, I better go back and do that again. Or I better click the dog clicker just in case. It was horrible. I didn't like it. Some people love it. Some people really enjoy working from home, but I didn't really enjoy that.
Yeah, I think from what I've heard from narrators specifically, it has been a relief to go back into the studio. And even though it does open up your opportunities as a narrator, if you're able to record from home, their preference really is to be able to go into a studio that they did not have to set up and have somebody else worry about the technical side of things, so that they can really just lose themselves in the text and focus on the craft of actual narration.
Yeah, it's too many heads all at once. For me, it was anyway. I was having to think about too much. And worrying about waking people up and disturbance and buses going by at the end of the road. And there was one guy who got on his bike. And then when the birds got up, I'd never heard such loud birds because there was no other noise at all. And I'd think, oh no, and I'd have to wait for the birds to shut up as well. So it was like, oh God. Yeah, so studio for me, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sort of amused at the picture of hearing bird song in the morning. And instead of that being, oh, what a lovely sound, it's like, ugh.
Oh no.
Keep it down.
I know. Who's that Bugs Bunny character with the big long moustache with his shotgun? I used to sort of be standing on the balcony going, "What the birds? Shut up! Shut
up!" So you mentioned that you do quite a lot of crime novels, and I think we have some of the Martina Cole books that you've done in the Listening Books collection, and we also have quite a few of the more family sagas. We've got, the Dilly Court novels, and we've got the Tulip Tearooms. Yeah. And what I'm wondering is if you have a favorite genre for narrating, and if that differs from the kinds of reading that you do on your own time.
I suppose for characters, big characters, I quite like the crime ones, like the Martinas and the Kimberleys, because you've always got this sort of central family, quite often based around the Cray twins or something, with two brothers, who run the sort of family firm, and always the strong matriarch mum who's Violet Cray. There's that sort of, and I quite like the pace of that, the pace of all the sort of all the stuff that goes on with the fights and the rivalry and all of that. But some of the sagas I find really relatable because they've sort of written about streets that I grew up on. So not in Victorian times, obviously, with Dilly Court and stuff, but you can sort of, there's a sort of a flavour of London that I think some of the saga writers, like Dilly Court, is a master at it, of capturing the sights and smells of a street in London. She absolutely, you can almost smell London in Victorian times when Dilly Court writes. And there's quite a few, Kay Brellend, Fiona Ford, Jean Fullerton, who all write about the streets, where I grew up. So I find the sagas really relatable. I don't know many villains, so that's not so much for the Martina Coles. But those women write about Elaine Everest. She does the Woolworths Girls. She does a series about the Woolworths Girls. She's a South Londoner. And you know the people. It's like you do know them. That girl that works behind the pick and mix, you sort of know her. You were at school with her. And the mum, oh yeah, you had a mate whose mum was like that. So I find them really enjoyable to do. And the pace of them, and a lot of them, because they're Londoners, they speak in the way that I speak. So I find them very easy to read and very real. They don't feel unreal. They feel quite real.
Yeah.
Or very real.
And does that differ from the kind of reading that you do personally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't read half as much as I used to read, but I tend to read non-fiction. I love history, absolutely adore history. And, I'm a member of History Hit and all of those books. So I will read, I've just read one about the Jack the Ripper victims.
Oh, right, yeah.
Hallie Rubenhold, I think her name was. And it's from the point of view of the women and their lives, and dispelling the myth that they were ladies of the night. They were ladies who had to earn their living in that way in a certain time because everybody did. It was just one of those poor times. Anne Boleyn, I'm obsessed with the Tudors and all of that. So I will read the latest book on Anne Boleyn or the latest book on Edward. There's one out now about Edward VI. So that's what I tend to read. I don't read a lot of fiction these days. I start prepping it. When I read, I start prepping. In my head, I'm thinking, and I'm thinking, you haven't got to find a voice for that person. It's you're just reading.
So it feels like work
pleasure.
then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you ask any audiobook narrator, I bet that they do. I bet they say, oh yeah, I start prepping it in my head.
Yeah. And I think listeners would find it interesting to know what goes into the prepping.
I suppose everyone's got different ways of doing it. I used to read it twice, but I don't anymore because I've sort of got a library in my head now. And I always look at the synopsis of a book to get a general feel about, you might start thinking of the heroine as some poor girl that lives in the slums, and it turns out she's not. She's a teacher, a quarter of the way through the book, and you've already thought of a voice for her, and then you think, oh no, I better give her a different voice. So I tend to read the synopsis. And then I do a cast list of characters with symbols. I use lots of symbols, and because I have to voice 1,000 cockneys usually, and you're only one instrument, you're not the whole orchestra, so I try to give them a sort of attitude of they might be, a bit dabby, a bit sort of nasal and a bit sort of dabby and talk really, really fast like that. Or they might glide a bit and sing-song their way through the book. That's a bit of a sort of exaggeration, but you have to sort of think of their speed and how they come across. And the hero can never be, sort of talking like that. You can't have a hero. So you've always got to have a sort of husky hero. Yeah, you've got to, haven't you? You've got to have a husky hero.
If you want the listeners to take him seriously, yeah, probably.
You can't have someone with adenoids, who sort of keeps wiping his nose. You just can't, can you? You've got to have husky hero. And I always just put HH, husky hero.
Oh, really?
And the heroine. Yeah, everyone else put HH, and then I know who it is. It's Aidan Turner in my head, obviously. They're all Aidan Turner. But and then the heroines, she's sort of like, I always put SS, soft and sensual. Giving away my trade tips now. But, she's got to be a bit she's got to be a bit soft, doesn't she? She can't be sort of, mouthy. She can't be like that, can she? And fall in love with the hero, and they go off into the sunset and he's wiping his nose and she's like talking like that. So you have to you have to make them a bit, and then you can have fun with the other characters. You can, if they're only in it for a little bit, you can send them up a bit. Dilly Court's great for that. Dilly Court writes really good, slightly heightened subsidiary characters. So she'll have a landlord or something who's really horrible and comes around and, turfs them out of their home. And he's only in a couple of scenes, but you can already see him. He's sort of like Uriah Heep, he sort of turns up and he's all like, and you can have a bit of a go with him because he's not going to upset the listener too much because he's not in it much, because otherwise that would be a bit grating, I think. But so you can have fun with your and you can see a lot of the writers are so good, you can see the character, you can instantly know what they sound like. So I will use like a symbol, like I'll use a squiggle if they're miserable, or I'll just do a little nose if they're a bit nasal. And other people use highlighter, yellow is for something and blue is for something, and then I'll mark it up with a little stylus on my finger, and I'll write a cast list, and when that person comes up, if I've forgotten what they sound like, I'll refer to the cast list and put my nose or my squiggle or my whatever it is I've done with them.
I think this is great. This is wonderful.
It's not rocket science, though, is it? I'm giving it all away. No, it's really hard. It's really hard. No, I've been doing it for so long that it is a bit like getting on a bike and riding it. You just know. You just work with it, and that's it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of things that you talked about that I think are really helpful for anybody who's listening who might want to get into audiobook narration. The different things that you might consider when you're coming up with the way that a character talks with their voice, which I think it can probably be a little easy to fall back onto pitch and accent alone. And feel like you've got to go higher and higher or lower and lower to keep differentiating. But as you described, there are other interesting ways to give their voice distinction, like varying their pace or their intonation. And I think those are really good things for people to think about because you often would have a huge cast of characters.
Yeah, because sometimes I think a character might be what I call a presser, which means you're pressing every word. That's a bit exaggerated, but like that they're firm and they're pressing, whereas somebody else might be a stabber. and they're stabbing out their words. And it's just your voice. But hopefully to the listener, they'll think, oh, that's that fast talking guy. Yeah. Oh, that's that really slow, methodical sort of guy. And it's really just your voice. Because as I said, you're only one instrument. You can't start being who you're not. You're the storyteller as well. That's the most important thing, being a storyteller. Like when people read to their kids, they're not doing 1,000 different voices and accents, but the child will just be engaged. And I think the first thing you've got to be is a storyteller. And if you're good at accents and character, well, so be it. But some readers don't use character. And they're still great. You know, they don't differentiate a lot with their voice. But you're so engaged with them as a storyteller. You listen. You love the book.
Yeah.
And then other people really go to town on voice and accent. And that's good as well.
You were saying how much fun you could have with some of the sort of supporting cast of characters.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that might be more fun to do than your standard husky hero and, what did you say, soft and sensual heroine.
Soft and sensual.
Yeah. I'm always curious about what you as a narrator, when you're looking at a book, when you're approaching a book that you're going to narrate, what things seem challenging in a fun kind of way, and what things might pop up that seem challenging in a really frustrating kind of way? Like
the challenging in a horrible way is normally an accent. You know, when you really, really are struggling with an accent and you can't get it, that's what I find challenging in a horrible way. Challenging in a good way, I suppose, finding a voice you've never found before, perhaps, or you can't quite nail that character, and then all of a sudden you do nail it, but you've had to think quite a lot about it, or you've gone in a different direction with it. Sometimes that happens. You give them, like I said, you give them a voice to start with, and then halfway through, I'll put a note to myself and go back to the beginning and go, no, Vera is, and I would have changed Vera completely, because as I've got to know her during the book, Vera doesn't sound like that at all. Vera's, you know, a bit soft and gentle, and I've made her some sort of over the garden fence with crossover Pinny. And then I've realised she's not like that at all. but voices, finding voices. And sometimes I'm a real laugher in studio. And this is terribly conceited, but sometimes I make myself laugh.
Of course.
Because characters make me laugh. And I'll be doing a character and I start laughing. And the producer will go, what? And I'll go, I don't know, that's just really funny. That's just really made me laugh. Also, you cry a lot. I'm a crier as well when someone's died. Oh, yeah, I'm terrible. Lump in the throat. Yeah.
Oh, that's really kind of touching.
Yeah. Well, a lot of narrators do, and that's why I didn't like doing multitasking, because I couldn't concentrate on that bit of the book. And I'll put, when I'm prepping, I'll put, don't cry. Because I know there's a death scene coming up, so I sort of have to prepare myself.
And does that work? Does telling yourself don't cry, does that work?
No, not really. No, you can feel your throat constricting. And I've never stopped to cry. I've never had to stop.
Oh, really?
But I can feel it. I can feel it welling up, and you're trying to open your throat back up again because it's knotted up. Oh, yeah, it's so emotional.
Yeah.
It's really draining. Audiobook reading is really draining.
Yeah. Well,
it can be.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, that brings me to another thing that I wanted to give you the opportunity to answer, which was, is there something that you wish more people knew about audiobook narration? Just
the stamina that you need and the quickness of shifting, because I've just done a book by a lady called Fiona Ford called The Good Time Girls. I've just finished recording it. And it had a New Yorker, an Irish lady, a Mancunian, a Liverpudlian, lots of Cockneys, of course. Then the GIs came over. We had mid-Atlantic, West Coast, East Coast, all of that. And quite often they were in the same room together. And as an audio reader, you've not got time to stop and go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm just going to try and get that accent in my head. So I'm writing next to it using accent kit. New York is number 7. Midwest is 4.5. Irish is 3.5. And I'm writing that so I know who's talking. And shifting that about and not stopping is really hard. And you get to the end of a day and you've done 180 pages of that. And you're knackered. So you need a lot of stamina. And your voice, it has got to be an old boot, you know. You've got to look after your voice and make sure that you don't damage that voice.
Yeah. I mean, what's your discipline for maintaining your voice?
Wine.
That's not something I usually hear recommended.
No, I always do a warm-up. I always do my humming, and I always do my sort of little scales going from high to low, because you've got to do a lot of men and you've got to do kids as well. So I always do my scales, especially if I'm driving to the studio. I can, really sort of belt it out. And then I do mouth exercises, but it's mainly lots of humming and lots of scales, just to loosen it up a bit. And then sitting on your voice as an actor, you've got to do that anyway. The rib reversal and all that sort of stuff. You've got to sit on your voice and not use your throat. And just as you would be if you were on stage, using your voice all the time.
Now, you have, having read hundreds of books, you've encountered every kind of character there is. You've encountered, I'd say, a lot of the same plot lines and tropes you've seen over and over again. And I'm curious if there are some you just kind of roll your eyes if you think, oh, not another one of these. Or
Yeah, you do, obviously. I mean, you know what's coming before you've even opened the book, but once you're on the job, as it were, you do go with it. You just go along with it, and you think bonus at the end of the day, because they're an easy read. They're easy to prep. They're easy to voice, and you can just get along with it. You can just go on with it. But I sometimes think I should write a saga.
Yeah.
When you think I could write a saga, because a lot of it is, boy meets girl or whatever. A lot of them, or the war. I feel like I've lived through the war. There's so many war books out there. I'm sure I flew a Spitfire or something in the war. I was definitely down the shelter, because I'm there. I'm in that shelter. I was, when the doodle bugs are dropping, I'm sure I've been there. I could write a book about the war. And people think I'm not that old, so I wasn't in the war, but there are so many war books out there. It's that nostalgia, isn't it? It's that all getting together and doing the Lambeth Walk when the bombs were dropping, which isn't true at all, but that's how sagas make you feel, that everyone loved each other. Yeah, they were all making cups of tea when the bombs were dropping. And the reality wasn't that at all, But that's what people like. That is what people like. They like that safety, that nostalgia. Yeah. That's what it is. It's nostalgia, isn't it? A good saga is nostalgia.
Yeah. And I think particularly in uncertain times, like with a pandemic and war and so on, I think they probably have even greater appeal as an escape into something that feels safer, even though that is also wartime. But how that ended. And so there is that sense of safety that you can kind of escape into for those books.
Yeah, that's why those Mary Jane staples were so popular.
Yeah. Yeah. So just before we finish up, do you listen to audiobooks yourself, or are you just ready to be finished with that once you're done working?
Podcasts, me. I love podcasts. I listen to so many podcasts. Crime, I listen to a lot of crime and history podcasts. I don't really listen to books, I must say.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
Hand on heart, I don't. But I do love a podcast.
Do you have any you'd recommend?
Well, all the crime ones, of course. Case File, Murder Mile. There's loads that I listen to. Oh, Scotland Yard, that's a good one. How the detectives solved crimes at Scotland. I'm not so much for the gory crime. I'm more for how they solved it. I quite like that sort of podcast. And I do a little podcast as well.
Oh, Wonderful.
Called Catford 6699. And it's set around Catford, where I was born. And it's just these little 6 minutes sort of skits with me and my ex-husband. He isn't really my ex-husband. He's an actor who plays my ex-husband called Charlie Armstrong. And it's just mum and dad talking like about the meaning of life and the solar system. And they know nothing about anything. So it's just 6 minutes of drivel, really.
That's fantastic. What's it called again?
Catford 6699. And dad phones mum every day, even though they're divorced. He phones her every day and he sort of says, "What's the meaning of life then, mum?" And all she does is talk about Aidan Turner and Poldark. So she's based on me, really.
I love it. Great concept. Oh, that's fantastic. What are you working on now, if you're allowed to say?
What am I working on now? I've just finished The Good Time Girls. Oh, the next thing I've got is Kerry Barnes, who comes from my neck of the woods, who writes crime, really prolific writer. And it's a new series, and I've forgotten the name of it. But so it's a crime book. And then I've got Edie Bayliss after that, but I do a lot of Birmingham crime as well. Don't ask me
really?
why. Yeah. I seem to get Birmingham books. I think it's because London and Birmingham are quite, accent kit would tell you, they're placed in the same place in the mouth, London and Birmingham.
I see.
So I find Birmingham really, really easy. It's like another native accent for me. So that's what I've got coming up, yeah.
Annie, I've had the best time. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you for listening. Here's a tip you may find useful. If you hear an audiobook and think, wow, I really enjoyed how that was read, try using the search function of whatever audiobook service you're using and search for that narrator's name. You'll see other titles they've read, and it can be a fun way to find new books. The Listening Books podcast is produced by Listening Books, a UK charity that provides an audiobook lending service for over 115,000 members who find that an illness, disability, learning difficulty, or mental health condition affects their ability to read the printed word or hold a book. It's simple to join. For more information, head to our website www.listening-books.org.uk.